Welcome to week number 2 of transformations. Technically, this is a different standard. This is transformation compositions. All compositions mean is that you're going to move the object more than once. Last week, when we did transformations, we were only moving it once. We were either rotating it, reflecting it, or translating it. Now we're going to move it twice. Still with the same tools, we're still either going to rotate, reflect, or translate. But after we do one of those, then we're going to do something else on top of it. So we're going to move it twice. Here's an example. You have a starting point, you have a spot where you ended up after your first transformation, and then your final resting place. That's why there's 3 triangles here. The starting point, where you were after the first move, and where you were after the second move, where you ended up. So how do you tell just by looking at this what order you're supposed to go in? Where are you supposed to start? Where are you supposed to go next? Where are you supposed to end up? You look at the prime marks. You look at the little apostrophes by the letters. The letters that don't have any apostrophes, that's your starting point. That's your pre-image. That hasn't changed. You guys should know that from last week. The shape without apostrophes on the letters is your pre-image. That's where you start from. So you're starting from the upper right-hand corner here. That's just a regular A, B, C. And where are you going to next? You're going diagonally over to here because those have 1 prime mark. And then you're going over to here last because those have 2 prime marks. So you're starting here at 1, going to 2, and ending up at 3. Now you know the order that you have to go in. Now you have to figure out how did you get from 1 to 2, and then how did you get from 2 to 3. So notice what I said there, because here's a common mistake. How did you get from 1 to 2, and how did you get from 2 to 3? A lot of people want to say, well, they don't want to say, but they want to pick the choice that is correct for 1 being the starting point for each one. So what I mean, let me show you what the right answer is for this one, and then I'll show you the common mistake of what I'm trying to talk about right now. So the right answer is, how do you get from 1 to 2? How do you get from the pre-image to the first image? Well, it's diagonal from there, so you could potentially reflect across the line y equals negative x. And, I labeled this wrong. Sorry, people. That would be B prime, and this would be C prime. All right, so it looks like maybe that would work. So let's try it. Let's connect our corresponding points. C would connect to C prime, B would connect to B prime, and all of a sudden, right away, we should know that this is not a reflection. Because when you connect the corresponding points, connect them with a line, if it's a reflection, your lines do not cross, ever. These lines are crossing. The lines connecting the B's cross the lines connecting the C's, so it cannot be a reflection. If your lines cross when you connect corresponding points, it is not a reflection. They would have to be, C would have to go to here, and B would have to go to here. Then our lines aren't crossing. As a matter of fact, they'd be parallel, and now we could have a reflection. But since we don't have that, it's not a reflection. It's not a slide. We're definitely not just sliding it down there. That's an easy one to tell. It's not a slide. So the only one left is a rotation. It has to be a rotation. And it is, in fact, a rotation. Hopefully you can see that. Remember, you can always imagine spinning your slate. And look, it looks like these 2 corners are exactly the same. They switch spots. This is your pre-image with no primes. That's your shape with the primes. But that's where this one was right here, and now this one was right there. So it is, in fact, a rotation. Here's a way to perhaps visualize rotations. If you're rotating, you're going in a circular motion. And if you're going counterclockwise, the C is always going to be on the front of this shape. This shape is moving towards the C direction. So the C is always going to be out in front. So you're rotating around in a circle like that. The C is always going to be out front. So the C is out front here. That's probably not the best way to describe that, but maybe that made sense to somebody. Maybe that'll help somebody. The way to just know it for sure is connecting your corresponding points. If you connect your corresponding points and they crisscross, it's a rotation. If they don't crisscross, it's either a reflection or a translation. And you can usually rule out a translation pretty easily. The translations are the easiest ones to tell if they just slide. This clearly didn't slide. It flipped around. It's rearranged. It doesn't have the same orientation. So you got to narrow down to either reflection or slide or rotation, and you can see that it's a rotation. Okay, and then the last one. How do you get from the prime to the double prime? Well, it's not sliding. The orientation isn't the same. We have our right angle in the upper right-hand corner, and here it's in the upper left-hand corner, so it's a different orientation. So it is definitely not a translation. A translation is the only one that preserves orientation. So again, it's either a reflection or a rotation. In this one, hopefully you can see that it's a reflection. You're just flipping it across the y-axis. Let's try our little test here. Connect corresponding points, A to A, C to C. Those lines don't cross. Therefore, it's a reflection. You see the difference? Here they crossed, so it was a rotation. Here they don't cross, so it was a reflection or a translation, but we already ruled out translation. That's what a lot of this test is like, is a picture, a graph with 3 pictures on it. The starting point, where you go to next, and where you end up finally. And then you'll have 4 choices on the 2 moves that you made. So it's kind of a hard one to teach because you just have to see it. You have to be able to visualize which one of these 3 am I using. The best way I can go about teaching that, I think, is the line trick. Connect your corresponding points, and if the lines cross, it's a rotation. If they don't cross, it's a reflection, perhaps a translation, if you haven't ruled that one out yet. All right, so I'm going to start you off easy today with just problems that have 3 pictures in it like that, and you got to pick the order of transformation. So there's going to be 2 answers basically for every problem. There's how did you get from no primes to 1 prime? What transformation was that? And then how did you get from 1 prime to 2 prime? What transformation was that? So that leads into what I was trying to say as a common mistake before. Your 2 answers are not, well, your first answer is from here to here. How did you get from here to here? A lot of people want to say the second answer is how did you get from here to here? People want to go back to the starting point, say how did you get from the starting point to here? So if that was the case, this will be one of the choices on a problem like this on a test. Rotate 180. That's right. That's how you get from 1 to 2. And then this could all be choice A, comma, reflect, x-axis. So that would be, this is the x-axis. That would be flipping across the x-axis. And a lot of people will choose that one because that's how you get from 1 to 2 and from 1 to 3. This would be the right answer if you were saying how do you get from 1 to 2 and how do you get from 1 to 3, but we never do it that way. It's never 1 to 3. It's always 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3. So the actual answer you're looking for would be how do you get from 1 to here and then how do you get from 2 to 3. And to get from 2 to 3, you actually reflect across the y-axis. So this one was a tricky one. It almost looked right. All you got to do is change that x to a y. Now it's right. So be careful on that. You just have to take your time on this test. You guys, I think, will be able to see this as long as you don't race through it and accidentally pick the wrong one. You should be fine.